Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Tender Ready training session on behalf of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority for the school transport procurement opportunity. I will just wait a second. I know we've got quite a good number of people booked onto the session today. So what I'll do while people are joining, I'll quickly do some introductions and some housekeeping. So I don't know if you have ever joined a Go for Growth webinar before, but if you haven't, my name is Gillian Askew and I'm one of the directors and co-founders of Go for Growth, and we are supporting the West Yorkshire Combined Authority throughout this school transport opportunity. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So the session will be recorded today. A copy of the recording plus a copy of the slides that I'm using today will be sent to you all, usually within 48 hours. I'll try and get them out today, though, if I can. You can ask questions throughout the session today. We are in Zoom and we are on a webinar. So what we've got are two bits of functionality. We've got chat functionality. If you wanted to introduce yourself and say hi, please do feel free. Please don't feel you have to, however. We've also got the Q&A functionality. So if you do want to ask a specific question about anything that I'm chatting you through or anything to do with the opportunity, if you could use the Q&A functionality, that would be super useful. And then we are likely to host a couple of drop-in sessions towards the back end of the opportunity before the bid closes. So if you keep an eye on the clarification questions, any dates for drop-in sessions will be advertised in there. What I'm going to try and cover today are some general stuff on public sector processes. I'm going to drill down into a little bit of detail on some of the key headlines, documents, dates, and some of the selection criteria stuff for this particular opportunity for the Combined Authority. And then we're going to have a quick look at social value as well. And then I'll open up for any questions. So if I move on, I'll keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A as we go. But if I don't get to it at the time, we will open up for questions at the end. So first thing I wanted to just chat through with you, you might be really proficient in public sector procurement, but equally this might be your first time, or you might not be overly used to competition. So what I thought I would show you is the steps that's involved in a public sector process. And these are the steps that you will see throughout the Combined Authority opportunity. There's an advertisement of an opportunity. If you have found the webinar today through the clarification questions in your tender, then you know that that's run by EU Supply, and that's where this Combined Authority opportunity is being hosted. But generally speaking, any opportunity in the public sector, usually above 25,000, for example, in wider public sector, will be advertised on Contracts Finder, and anything over threshold, and I'll talk to you about the thresholds in a second, will be advertised on something called Find a Tender Service. Contracts Finder and Find a Tender Service are search engines, and they will link you back to the procurement portal where you would need to bid and get more information on actual opportunity. In this case, it's your tender, which is hosted by EU Supply. In terms of thresholds, the inclusive of VAT, the current threshold for supplies and services, this is non-central government, by the way, is a little over 214,000. Works is around 5.4 million, and the light touch regime is 663,000. And that will be relevant when we get to talk about standstill at point number 6. Usually these values are a maximum, and they're generally not a guaranteed amount of what you can achieve through the contracts. Some bids might specify a maximum cost that you could submit depending on how you're asked to submit your pricing. Anything over those particular day rates or maximum budget for a bid might be disqualified. But at the beginning of any process, what there will be is a clarification period. And this clarification period is where you can ask questions through that portal in your tender, in this case, to clarify information that will be useful for you to help you bid. Our advice always is use clarifications early. It's often the case, and we've also fallen foul of it ourselves, where providers don't necessarily read the documents early on or until too late, have some questions and then miss the CQ deadline, the clarification question deadline. And whilst many authorities will try to answer questions if they can, even post the deadline, actually they don't have to once the clarification question deadline has passed. So it's really important that if you have any points of clarity that you want to make sure that you get those in before the clarification date. And I will talk you through those key dates. You will submit, obviously, your tender by a deadline date, and there will be a date and a time usually combined. And then once everybody has submitted and contracting authorities can't see those submissions until the competition window has closed. So if that is a specific date at 12 p.m. lunchtime, they won't be able to see whose bids are in until 12:01, for example. Once they have got the bids, they'll go into evaluation, so they'll be scored. And out of the back of that, there'll be something called the intent to award. Usually after an intent to award, and especially over threshold, there'll be a standstill period of currently 10 calendar days, and it's clear calendar days. Public sector can't award on a weekend or a bank holiday, for example, and I think that's changing in the Procurement Act to 8 working days, but it's currently 10 clear days. And winners and losers are basically notified, and you should then get your feedback if you are unsuccessful. And effectively, you have those 10 clear calendar days then in order to challenge that result. Now, it's important that a challenge is understood correctly in terms of if you believe that you've been marked incorrectly, that or the process hasn't been run appropriately or fairly, then you may enter your challenge, and you would do that through the portal. Once the standstill period has passed, it will then move to award. And in terms of the contracts process, I've broken it down into 6 key elements. In any procurement, and it's certainly true in this case, in any procurement, there'll be bidder instructions. And they're usually housed in the invitation to tender document. Again, our advice is try not to be overwhelmed. There can often be a lot of information in there, but obviously don't ignore them either. The bidder instructions will help you to navigate the process. They're usually in the ITT, or they may well be in a separate document. And at the front end of any procurement, there'll be something called the Standard Selection Questionnaire. There are a number of sections in the SSQ, the abbreviation for it, and determined by the value, the complexity, or the risk profile, and certainly the sector that it's in, for example, social care. You may not have to answer all of the sections, but equally you may. In any procurement, there'll be something called a specification, or in this case, the Combined Authorities terminology is a statement of requirements, an SOR, and you'll see that in the documentation. It does exactly what you would expect it to do. It's a description of what the contracting authority wants to buy. And on the back of that, there'll be an evaluation criteria. So a description of how the responses to the questions that you're asked will be scored and how much each question is worth by a weighting. And in usual procurements, you will have potentially 3 or 4 different types of questions. You'll have quality technical questions. You will obviously have your pricing submission, and you will have potentially social value type questions as well. And there are social value questions in this particular tender. In any contract, whether that's public sector or private sector, there will be legal terms and conditions at play. Again, our advice is to read them carefully, ask any questions that you might have to the contracting authority through that clarification process. If you're a member of your local chambers, for example, or membership organisations like the Federation of Small Businesses, you're likely to have access to free legal support. So you can also ask questions there if you have some questions on the impact of legal terms and conditions. And then finally, you have the feedback process. So all bidders should be notified. Well, you will be notified whether you've been successful or unsuccessful. If it's the latter, what you should get is your score versus the winning score, and hopefully some detailed feedback or an explanation of those scores. The Procurement Act 23, when that goes live, currently that's set for the 28th of October, there'll be something called assessment summaries that have to come with your results feedback letter. So the new regulations are certainly trying to increase that feedback process. And that will be better for providers in the general scheme of things. You can see on the screen that items 2, 3, 5 and 6 are in blue and underlined. We did a series of lunch and learn sessions back in March on those 4 topics. So I've included links to those short fire lunch and learn sessions. So they're about 15, 20 minutes long to get some more detail beyond what we've covered here today. So for example, in the legal terms and conditions, although it doesn't constitute legal advice per se, we are looking at the core headline terms that you'll probably find in most contracts and what they mean and what you should effectively look out for. It comes from a practitioner's perspective, but hopefully those things will be helpful. And then if we think about this particular opportunity, these are the documents that you will find in your tender. So there's a number of them. Our advice is always to read through all of them. We're going to talk about the specification or statement of requirements, as the combined authority terminology is, shortly, and how to use that. So I'm not going to dwell on that here, but these are all of the documents that are in there. We've double checked with the combined authority. And in terms of what you have to upload when you put your submission in, you would be uploading Appendix 2, which is the selection questionnaire. Social value is done in 2 ways in this particular tender. So you will, your social value delivery plan, the qualitative questions will be uploaded through your tender, and the quantitative measures and descriptions should be done through the social value portal. And I'm going to do a quick demonstration of social value portal today. So that's how social value will be treated. You will also upload Appendix 3A, which is the award quality and social value questions. You will upload Appendix 3B, which is the pricing document. You will upload Appendix 4, which is the form of tender. And also TUPE may apply in this particular opportunity. So Appendix 8 is the TUPE confidentiality agreement, which you will need to sign before TUPE information will be released to you. So the advice of both the combined authority and Go for Growth peers, Go for Growth, is if you haven't signed that TUPE confidentiality agreement already, please do so as a matter of urgency so that that information can be sent out to you. In terms of key dates for this opportunity, so the ITT was issued on the 17th of May this year. The clarification question deadline is coming up. It's the 7th of June at lunchtime, 12 p.m. So that's this Friday. So if you have any questions, it has been extended. It almost certainly won't be extended again, the clarification period. So if you do have any questions, make sure that you get them in through the portal well before 12 p.m. on Friday. The combined authority have committed to responding to those questions at the very latest by the 14th of June, at 12 p.m. And the deadline for submission of your tender is 19th of June, 2024, also at 12 p.m. After that, completion of evaluation and the start of that standstill period that we talked about will be the 19th of July. Standstill period ends 29th of July, and contracts will be issued to successful tenderers around the 19th of July, subject to a successful standstill period ending. And then the contract start date and commencement of services is the 2nd of September this year. The combined authority were keen for us to just pull out 4 parts of selection criteria that's fairly unique to this opportunity or transport type opportunities for the combined authority. If you've applied for any of the other transport opportunities recently, you might have seen some of these, but first, you will be asked to confirm if your organisation has fewer than 250 employees. From a classification perspective, that would make you a small to medium enterprise, a SME. In terms of timetable, you'll be asked to confirm that you will adhere to the timetable proposed by the combined authority for the routes that you're bidding for. If an alternative timetable is being proposed, you're asked that you'll confirm that that will arrive no earlier than 30 minutes before school starts and depart no later than 20 minutes after school finishes. So there's some declarations that you need to make there. In terms of capacity, you'll be asked to confirm that you can meet the minimum capacity for all routes as outlined in the appendices on routes and lots. And that's pertinent to what you're bidding for. And in terms of 8.5 vehicle standards, you will also be asked to confirm that the vehicles that you'll use for the delivery of services meet with the minimum vehicle requirements for the routes that you're bidding for as outlined in the statement of requirements. So, for example, in home to school in Appendix 1A, or the statement of requirements for leisure in Appendix 1B. So that's where you'll find those standards, and you'll be asked to confirm on a self-cleaning basis those questions as part of the selection questionnaire. So if we just delve into statement of requirements a little bit more, the statement of requirements, as I've said, it's basically what the contracting authority wants to buy. It is a crucial document in any bid. And this is how we do it, so you will absolutely find your own way. But certainly one of the first jobs that we do when we're seeking to bid for an opportunity is to read through that specification or statement of requirements really thoroughly, making a note of any questions that we might have for the customer through the clarification process. Also noting any evidence that we might be able to use during the tender process, and also making a note of any gaps that we might have in being able to deliver those statement of requirements. And of course, if there are gaps, and sometimes there are, you'll need to think about those gaps and whether they mean you should not submit a bid. If there's substantial gaps, so if, for example, it says in primary school transport, seatbelts need to be in operation and your vehicle doesn't have seatbelts, that's quite a sizable gap. If you can't remedy that for contract start date, for example, then you might decide that the opportunity is out of reach at the minute. But that's what you're doing with that statement of requirements or specification. You're effectively confirming to yourself that you can deliver what the authority is asking for. When you complete the quality or technical questions, your answers to those questions should relate back to the statement of requirements. Effectively, what those evaluation questions are doing is they're testing your ability to deliver what's needed. So referencing back to the parts of the specification or statement of requirements in this case that it relates to could actually really help enhance your scores. It's worth noting that in public procurement, you should only be tested in evaluation criteria, something that is within those statement of requirements. And there are two different statement of requirements here. So leisure services, for example, have primary age children. So they do have seatbelt requirements, as I've mentioned. Secondary school services don't. So it will be important to think about what those things are that you need, and you should expect to be tested on things that are in the specification. There are two criteria in public procurement: the selection criteria and evaluation criteria. So the selection criteria at the front end of the procurement, we've talked about that standard selection questionnaire. Effectively, they're testing the business and what you have in place to be able to operate. So it will be testing your insurances, your licenses, your accreditations, your policies. It'll look at your financial standing, your capability through references, that kind of thing. Evaluation is more about the contract specifics of what you will deliver through the contract. And so the questions, generally speaking, should be framed as a look forward about how you will do something. And if you can answer those questions backed up by evidence, linking back to the statement of requirements, as I've mentioned, that can often really help to maximise your scores. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second. We would recommend that you read the scoring carefully, answer with the scoring criteria in mind. I'm going to show you what the evaluation criteria is for this particular opportunity in a second. When you read back over your submission, excuse me, or even better, ask somebody else in your organisation to have a read through, look for the evidence against the scoring criteria. If a score of 5 says, have you evidenced a clear focus on people who use these services, their families, etc., If your answer to that is no, I haven't evidenced that, then actually you know that you need to do more work on that specific answer. So this is the evaluation criteria for this particular opportunity. So 0, unacceptable, up to 100% excellent. But in each case, each score has a definition. So in terms of excellent, to achieve a score of 100%, it's the same as good, which is about above average demonstration by the tenderer, satisfies the requirement, provides confidence of the ability to deliver services, but additionally provides exceptional demonstration of its ability, understanding, experience, skills, resource and quality measures required to provide the services. So you know beforehand what the score means and effectively what the authority is looking for you to show them in your answers in order to be able to give it a specific score. And when we think about answering questions, there are some tips, I guess, that we can talk through. And I've got an example of it on the next slide. But effectively what we say is if you break any question, and this works for any qualitative kind of question, if you break the question down into the verb elements, you can see really what the authority is driving at. And if you answer those verb elements, then you will be hopefully maximising your chances for the best possible scores. We often fall foul of repeating the question at the top of our answer. We don't need to do that. But also, we need to make sure, and this sounds so obvious, but we need to make sure that we only answer the question that we've been asked. And it can often be hard because we're, as business owners, especially smaller organisations, but all of us in business, we're generally very passionate about what we do. And so often we can be tempted to answer more than the question that we've been asked, but that will rarely elicit any extra points. So being succinct, being to the point and answering the question is what we're asked to do. Evidence your answers as much as possible. So if you're going to say you do something, can you talk about the how you will do it and how you have done it if you've done it before? But providing that, what we're effectively trying to do is give the evaluator confidence that we can deliver what the specification is asking us to deliver through the answer to that specific question. And then if there are any documents that you're asked for, such as an implementation plan, etc., don't forget to upload it. Or if you're asked to upload your licenses, accreditations, whatever it is, don't forget to upload those documents. Often there'll be things like a word count at play. Any councils, local authorities, the West York Combined Authority, they'll be strict at cutting off on word counts and also page counts. So if it says there are 500 words, the evaluator will only read the first 500 words. So if you put 800 words in, the last 300 will simply be redacted. It will be cut off and the evaluator won't see it and it won't count. And if you have got a word count, repeating the question at the top is an exercise in futility. It just uses up that word count. Don't waffle. Your page count will generally, if there is a page count constraint, it will generally have a font size specification. So it might be 4 pages at Arial, font size 12. If you therefore try to use a smaller font size so that you can get more words in your 4 pages, the whole thing could be discounted. So the constraints that are in any opportunity, any competition, we really need as bidders to make sure that we adhere to them, because it won't help us to not. And so this is an example of a question. So I believe this is a real question and it is in a transport context. So what I've highlighted in yellow are effectively the verb elements. So these are the things that you're asked to answer. So if you tick off that you've answered those yellow bits, then you have at least a good chance of being able to fulfill the answer in its fullest sense. So in this case, looking at drivers and training, total number of drivers that are or will be employed for the delivery of services, 2 specific things in there. The number and then ratio of spare drivers available, and that's about covering absenteeism and emergencies. And then the number of drivers with the appropriate licenses and certifications. And that's all about, the regulated activity involving children and young people. So in those 3 bullet points, you'll need to talk about the total number of drivers that either are or will be used to deliver the services, and that ratio that comes with them in terms of spare drivers. And you can talk about how you cover absenteeism and emergencies, and you can use evidence of when you've done that before or how you will do that through a process going forward. And then you can talk about the drivers who have got all of the appropriate licenses and certifications. So I have 50 drivers, of them 25 have got this. This is the number and ratio of spare drivers. Here's our process for managing planned or unplanned absenteeism, etc., etc. And in there, it says, as described at Appendix 1, Statement of Requirements, your PCV driver licence, cleared DBS, enhanced, and the CPC card. So it tells you where to go to look for those things in the Statement of Requirements. And it says, where you're bidding for multiple routes or lots, please specify these numbers by route or lot. So it's giving you the instructions there, and the same in 2B. And you can see at the bottom in the response summary that it's a maximum of 2 sides of A4 at 12 PT aerial, and attachments do not count towards the response length limit. So attachments are allowed and they don't count into your maximum 2 sides of A4. In any live opportunity, including the specific one for the Combined Authority, if you use that sort of approach, hopefully it will be a helpful way to approach it. So in this specific opportunity, there are 2 lots. There's home to school and leisure services. The Combined Authority, and these are words lifted directly from the documentation, they're not paraphrased. So, but it is about just reiterating what's required. If you're submitting a tender for home to school transport and leisure services, you can, if you choose to, submit 2 quality responses using Appendix 3A. And you can also submit 2 separate qualitative social value tenders. And they will, if you submit 2, they will be scored independently with quality scores applied to the respective type of service that you've tendered for. You can, however, choose, should you wish to submit just 1 quality and 1 qualitative social value response and have those scores applied to both home to school and leisure services. However, what you do need to consider is that home to school and leisure services have unique statements of requirements, and your quality responses must demonstrate how you meet the requirements for each of those services within the specified page limits. So if that is a 2-page page limit at Arial font size 12, you would be writing your 2 pages on both services and demonstrating and evidencing both services if you chose to only submit 1 quality and 1 qualitative social value response for both. You can do 2, so 1 each, or you can do just 1. However, on the quantitative social value responses in the social value portal, you must do them separately through social value portal, and that's due to initial contract terms that are different. Also to note, questions 1, 2 and 3 in Appendix 3 have minimum quality requirements of minor reservation. If that's not met by the tenderer's submission, the Combined Authority reserves the right to eliminate the tenderer from the procurement process and reject its tender without further assessment. So watch out for that when you're going through the questions. Make sure that you are doing everything you can to achieve a score that's higher than minor reservation at the very least. So we're going to talk a little bit about social value. Forgive me if I'm telling you things that you already know on social value, but I thought it was worth covering it before we look at the social value specifics for this particular tender. So social value is driven by a piece of legislation called the Public Services Act of 2012, which was assented to law in 2013. It's often referred to as the Social Value Act, but it's actually called the Public Services Act. And there is also something called the National Procurement Policy Statement, of which it's just been released. But the general themes in the National Procurement Policy Statement and the Social Value Act are around creating new business, jobs and skills, tackling things like climate change, waste, and increasing supplier diversity, innovation and resilience. And effectively, what I'm paraphrasing is that all of this is reinforcing the message that procurement is not a fastest race to the bottom. It's not all about the lowest price, but it's also about the need to take a broader view of value for money. And there are things called the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN goals, they're adopted by all the United Nations member states back in 2015, and effectively this 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, it provides a shared blueprint, if you like, for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. And at its heart are these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And they come with a plethora of targets, but effectively what they are an urgent call to action for all countries, both developing countries, but also developed countries in a global partnership. And effectively, they are recognising that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, that reduce inequality and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and our forests. And you will see, so the UK obviously has signed up to the UN SDGs. You will see these flowing through things like the social value model. You'll see them flowing through the Public Services Act and the National Procurement Policy Statement as well. So if you're not familiar with the UN SDGs, it could be certainly worth a look to familiarise yourself with them. So on social value in this particular opportunity, if you're not registered on Social Value Portal, then you can use these links. They will take you to registration. There is a link for each opportunity. And as I mentioned, for the quantitative part, so the Social Value Portal element of social value, you will need, if you're bidding for both leisure and swimming and home to school transport, you will need to fill it out both in Social Value Portal. If you do have to register for the first time, you'll receive an email to confirm that you've successfully registered. Your email will typically include a username, which is usually first name, last name at socialvalueportal.com, and a password link that expires within 48 hours of being sent. So if you are going through for the first ever registration, you'll need to just look out for that. So just a note, and it's in very big and bold letters, but just to reiterate what I've said, if you're applying for both lots, you will need to submit quantitative social value responses for each lot. That is your choice in the qualitative element of social value, and in the quality questions. If you want to submit one for each lot, you can, but you can also opt for your qualitative and quality questions to span both. So let me just do a quick demonstration. So if you are, and hopefully you can see my Social Value Portal screen now, if you are already registered with Social Value Portal, what you can do is go to your home screen and submit the project reference. So I will tell you that I've learnt the hard way that it's not S and then a capital I-O, it is a small l. So it's S small l 0, 4 zeros, and then 0 RZXX or 0 RZCN. It is case sensitive. So when you put the reference in there, you need to make sure that you do it case sensitive, and it will follow 3, 4, and then 5. And the references are here. So the bit that I just talked about was this last bit here. So S little l 0, 4 zeros, 0, capital R, capital Z, and then C and N uncapitalized. So that's the reference that you'd be putting in if you're already registered. Or click on this link and it will take you to a registration page. As I found today, if you're already logged in to Social Value Portal and you click on this link, it will say to you, looks like you're already logged in. You don't need to re-register for this. You can find it through your login screen, and then you would just end up back here. So that's how to get there. Once you're in, you will go into effectively the Social Value Portal if you've used this before, for example. So you can read some guidance if you need it. You can learn more about the TOMS, and that stands for Themes, Outcomes and Measures. Or you can go straight into adding your social value. As I understand it, and it might be worth asking a clarification question on it, but as I understand it, NT1 is not being scored in this opportunity. That doesn't mean that you can't fill it out, but it won't be taken into account in your final quantitative score. But what I will do is just use it as an example. So if you go into NT1, for example, it's all about the number of direct employees, FTEs hired or retained on the contract. So you would tick it and then add selected. And then what you will do is you'll end up in the specific calculator that you've picked, NT1 in this case. You'll be picking whether it's full or part-time, the number of employees over the life of the contract, employment duration. So if we put that in years, 3 employees employed for 3 years, for example, it will be doing the calculation for you. And then you will be clicking save on that. And then you would need to add your description here. It gives you an understanding of what that description is and a full target. So what it's asking you to do in 1,000 characters is summarize your strategy for directly employing the target number of local people on this contract. For example, if you plan to advertise in local newspapers, explain which ones, how regularly, or if you're cooperating with local job centres, specify which ones and how you will approach engaging with them. And so for all of the TOMs, you'll be doing the same thing. So you can go to, for example, initiatives aimed at reducing crime and add that one. And then you can add your estimated volunteer hours. And as you see, it works out your value. So you can put your contributions in there, hit save, and then you would go back in. And again, you would be adding your target description. And again, there is a breakdown of what that's looking for. And in all cases, you have 1,000 characters to do it. So you would work through all of the TOMs that you want to include in there. There may be guidance of which ones that the combined authority or whoever you're bidding for is looking for. But and of course, the TOMs are in use through Social Value Portal for this specific opportunity. They're not in every single one. So you might be doing this a different way if it's a different opportunity. But effectively, that's what you'll be doing. If anybody needs any help outside of this, there is tons of support through Social Value Portal. Please feel free to pick up the phone to them or read any of their guidance documents. And of course, our door is open. You can always come and have a chat with Go for Growth, and we'll do everything that we can to help you. And so just a final couple of things then. So common pitfalls in bids. We asked a number of public sector organisations, what do bidders typically fall foul of? And I see lots of this at play when we're working on bids ourselves. It's really easy. And actually, I'm going to say that a different way. It's really difficult to mark your own homework. So if you can get some support from inside your own organisation, if you can, for people to help with this, so much the better. But I'll pick out a few things. So definitely answer the question that you've been asked and no more than that, and certainly no less. Make sure you submit all the documentation. Caveating is an interesting one. If you feel like you have to caveat something, unless it's very specific in terms of scenarios, generally speaking, that might mean that there's a clarification question you need to ask. Caveating can be super difficult for evaluators. If this scenario is at play, it will be this cost. If that scenario is at play, it'll be this cost. If they're not scenarios that you've been asked about specifically, that can make it hard to score. Make sure that you match the specification, that you've read it and you are comfortable that you can deliver that specification, because that's what you'll be contractually obliged to do. And in Go for Growth, we would never tell you not to reuse things that you've already put together, but they come with health warnings. So obviously, if there's references to customers, you need to check the validity, the relativity, and the proportionality of anything that you've used before to make sure that they're right and relevant for this particular opportunity. A lack of evidence will always be challenging for scoring. So if you can, I once scored a bid that where the claim was, we are world class eradicating modern slavery. And that's a very grand claim to make. But what it really lacked was any evidence of how. So what you don't want is your evaluator to be going, that's all brilliant, but how are you doing it? How will you do it? How have you done it? So make sure that you have got as much evidence as you can. As I said, what we're trying to do is give the evaluator confidence that you can deliver. Make sure that any key information that you're asked for is included. You don't miss any out. Be aware of those constraints. Are documents required? What's the word or page count? Don't assume that, especially if you're an incumbent provider, that anything that happens in the day-to-day operation of your current contract can be taken into account for this bid. If you want scoring on something, you need to write it down. Don't assume anything. Don't assume that people know anything or assume that they understand what that acronym means. Spell it out. Make it super easy for the evaluator who may not be a technical expert in this sector. Make sure it's dead easy for them to give you the best possible scores. And make sure you are compliant in the selection questionnaire. So have you got your assurances, your insurances, your accreditations, your licenses? Have you got all of the things that you need in order to be able to take part in this opportunity? And then some key messages finally. Read all the documents carefully. I know that sounds really obvious, but those key dates, for example, are really important. Ask any questions that you have as early as possible through that clarification process. And on things like school transport, there will obviously be safeguarding requirements. There's more detail on that in the contract terms. Make sure that you're happy that you can comply with those. TUPE may apply in this opportunity, but it might apply in others as well. So make sure you understand the implications of TUPE and get that documentation and TUPE information as early as you can. And then, make sure you've uploaded everything needed for submission. And finally, double check and triple check before submission. It is super difficult to mark your own homework. So if there is anyone else in your organisation that can just have a read through, it can always be really useful and really helpful. And the final thing to say is this can feel like a very lonely place bidding, no matter what size of business you are. We are supporting the West Yorkshire Combined Authority throughout this opportunity. So if you've got any questions or you want to have a chat, you can give either myself or Lauren a shout. We have a bookable calendar, so you can give us a call, drop us an email, or book a one-to-one via Teams with us. And we've got lots of useful resources in our video library, so you can have a click on there as well. And if you'd like to stay in touch with us as we offer training courses and lots of other workshops, etc., please do feel free to sign up to our newsletter. We don't spam. You can opt out at any time. And hopefully what we'll give you is useful information. And so that's it from me, really. I just will open up now for questions. Hopefully, I know that's been a super whistle-stop tour, but hopefully that's been useful. Let me stop sharing. Hopefully that's been useful for information for people. If you have any questions, please do feel free to pop them in the Q&A. If, like me, you're not got any questions at the minute, but you might have later, or the minute we hang up, you think, oh, yeah, no, I do have a question. You will get the slide deck out. I'll certainly try and get that out tonight. My contact details, I'll pop in the chat. So let me just do that now, just in case anybody does want to send a question over. You can do so today before the documents and video recording does come out. But if there are no further questions, I won't keep us all here. I know everybody is super busy. Thank you all for joining. I do hope it's been of some use and some help. Do give us a shout if we can be of any more help, and look out for any drop-in sessions that we might host between now and the 19th of June. But in the meantime, if you've got any questions at all, please do just shout. Is this for any new tenders going forward for WYCA or a specific contract? So today's session has been about the home to school transport, which is reference CA87497 for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. But arguably, a lot of what we've talked about today will stand true for almost every public sector procurement. So things like the approach to using specification and statement of requirements, for example, will be useful for any opportunity, not just this one. But some of the information like key dates and documents is very specific to this particular opportunity. Hopefully that's been useful. It is 12:45. We try never to run over if we can help it. Thank you again to everybody for coming. If you need anything at all, give us a shout and I'll get the documents and recording over to you as soon as I possibly can. Thank you, everybody.